Welcome everybody to Crystal Kyle and Friends. Today we have on Mehdi Hassan. That's how it's pronounced. I've heard.
Yes.
I've always said Mehdi Hassan, but that's the classic like white boy way of saying it.
Well, we're excited to have Mehdi this week. Obviously, I parted ways with MSNBC, but is launching his own venture. And also, I mean, there's a lot to talk to him about in terms of domestic politics and certainly what is unfolding in Israel. Just receiving word this morning of this horrific massacre of starving Gazans who were just trying to get food, more than 100 killed. So get his reaction to what's going on in the ground there as well.
Yeah, so a lot of stuff to get to. But before we do, we have some big news, Supreme Court-wise, Trump-wise. Go ahead and fill everybody in on that.
Yeah, so Trump actually scoring what is, in effect, a huge win for him in terms of delaying the election subversion case possibly beyond Election Day. The Supreme Court has decided to take up this preposterous, really, question of whether or not Trump has complete immunity for literally everything he did while he was president of the United States. And most legal analysts, although you can't guarantee, don't think they're going to ultimately side with him. If they did, that would be the wildest shit of all time, just like actually saying the president can do whatever they want and commit whatever crimes they want with no consequences whatsoever. But the key thing here is the delay that it will cause. So CNN reporting that they say they're going to take this up the week of April 22. That means the actual trial for this won't start based on the previous comments of the judge and how they're going to handle the timeline. Likely won't start till September, October at the earliest. So again, very possible this gets pushed beyond Election Day. Or, I mean, there is a possibility that then this trial is unfolding right in like peak election season, and all of the events of January 6th and the election subversion stuff, all the stop the steal, rigging that led up to that, could be put front and center in front of the American people just before the election day. That is a possibility. But for Trump, who doesn't have a great legal argument here or in a variety of other cases, just pushing this thing off has been his strategy from the beginning. Yeah,
so the idea is Supreme Court takes this up, that delays the trial, kicks the can down the road, gives him an opportunity to win the election. Then if he's back in office, there is no dispute. You actually can't criminally charge a president who is currently sitting.
According to like DOJ guidance and memo, like it's not actually set in stone, but they would likely abide by that. And since it's federal charges, he could also pardon himself.
Pardon himself? This is insane.
And the other cases are not in great shape either.
The Fannie Willis one, right?
The only one that actually looks like it's really going forward full steam ahead is the New York one, which is the weakest one and has the lowest level of charges. And they did have to do some like sort of creative legal justifications to raise that to the level of a felony. That one looks like it's about to start. But the Georgia case is not in a great shape. They're, arguing over this affair that Fannie Willis had. And so that's ongoing and kind of not, we don't know what's going to happen there in terms of timing. The documents case down in Florida, he got a very sort of favorable judge there that one is... I
think he appointed the judge, right? Eileen Cannon?
Yes. That one is very unlikely from what I'm reading to even start before Election Day. So he's getting lucky in all these cases.
So in other words, the case that in my estimation is the strongest, the Jack Smith case where I read through the entire indictment. Remember we debated Michael Tracy on the merits of that case.
The documents.
Yeah, I'm talking about the Jack
election
Smith.
Subversion.
Yeah, election subversion.
Those are both Jack Smith cases.
Yeah. Okay. But I remember as I was reading through it, I was like, this really seems like a strong case that he's made.
Yeah.
I thought people argued, these are some novel interpretations, et cetera, but it's also a novel instance of a former president trying to effectively overthrow the election. So of course, by definition, some of it was going to be novel, but I remember thinking it was really, really, really strong. And then now what we're learning is they're basically kicking the can down the road to try to make it so that that doesn't happen before Election Day, which kind of nullifies it in a sense.
Yeah.
Right? It kind of nullifies it in a sense.
That's exactly right. And with regard to that case, I actually just recently saw a poll, and, I'm skeptical of people aren't great at anticipating how they'll react to different eventualities. But this poll asked people about the specific cases. Like, okay, if he's found guilty in the election subversion case, would you vote for him? If he's found guilty in the documents case, would you vote for him? And that was the one that actually had the biggest negative impact on him, was the documents case, which I wouldn't have necessarily predicted, because I feel like the stop the steal stuff and January 6th like looms so large in terms of the horror that people who hate Trump feel about him being back in office. But it does make sense to me on another level, because the the documents case is very clear cut. And it also speaks to something else that people hate about Trump, which is that he just feels like he's above it all, like the rules don't apply to him. Like he's both incredibly sloppy, but then also like very intentionally subverting the law in this instance and just thinks he can do it and get away with it because he's who he is. And so it was interesting to me that at least in this poll, people were saying, no, that's the one that I actually find to be the most damaging to him.
So two-tier justice system in the opposite way from what he means. Because when he says two-tier justice system, it's like, you guys are being extra hard on me.
Right.
And in reality, the two-tier is like, actually, they took away easy on you, bro.
Oh,
and you got away with a lot of stuff.
No private citizen would have gotten away with the document crap he pulled.
Definitely. So just so everybody understands, the Supreme Court taking up this case, right? Like you said, most experts think they'll swat it aside and be like, we're not siding with Trump. But just the fact that they took this up is beyond absurd because Trump's argument is, I'm immune from literally anything and everything, which by its very nature means you're setting a precedent that somebody like Joe Biden would be immune from absolutely everything. And this is, okay, so the argument that they made in the hearing before it got to the Supreme Court, one of the judges asked, so what if the president's responsible for murder, like getting SEAL Team 6 to assassinate one of their political opponents? And the argument from Trump's side was, at first it was you literally can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Then it morphed into, when they realized that's not a tenable position, it was like, he needs to be impeached as president and then convicted on that impeachment in the Senate in order for there to be any consequences where after that you could maybe try them criminally.
Right.
Which is, as you pointed out, that's an insane standard. Joe Biden could order an assassination of Donald Trump, step down before any impeachment hearings begin, and just get away with it scot-free.
That's right.
Guys, this is Game of Thrones level insanity. This is like total wild, wild west. Let's go back to the medieval times. Let's, do coups and have total immunity for the people who are at the top.
Yep.
This is, literally insane. Absolutely insane.
Yes.
And this is what they're hearing. So I don't know if you know the answer to this, but do you know which justices said? Like, yeah, we're going to hear that? Do we not know which justices?
I don't think that we know.
Okay.
From what I read, I haven't seen any names on. I don't think that we get information about which justices wanted to take it up and which didn't. But there had been some hope that they would just let the federal appeals court ruling stand.
Of course.
Because it was unanimous and because it was scathing. They were not close. The Republican justices, the Democratic justices, whoever they were appointed by, they were all like, this is fucking insane. And I think even the Trump team knew that this was sort of like a Hail Mary. But all they had to do
the delay tactic
was to get the Supreme Court just to agree to take it up. And the timeline is, like I said, April 22nd, they're going to hear oral arguments. Expectation is we get a decision by the end of June. The judge on the case has made some comments about the amount of time they want to give Trump to be able to prepare. That's why people are saying, okay, we're looking at September, October. Then he's only one more, some kind of challenge away from it being after Election Day. And if he wins, that's it. So
now, by the way,
crazy.
At the same time that this came down, we got news that now another state has sided against Trump on the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment question, the insurrection clause. So the idea is, I think it was a court in Illinois, and you have all the facts, you can correct me in a second. A court in Illinois was like, sorry, we're kicking you off the ballot because you violated the plain face reading of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and you did an insurrection, or at the very least aided and abetted an insurrection. So now that's what, the third state that has now said you can't be on the ballot?
Yes. So this is a judge in Illinois. The judge, I guess, was appointed by a Democrat or is a Democrat. And they ruled on Wednesday that he had engaged in insurrection and was therefore ineligible to appear on the state's primary ballot as per that clause in the Constitution and the 14th Amendment. They say the decision creates uncertainty on the state's March election, in which early voting is already underway, and also adds urgency. I'm reading from the New York Times, for the U.S. Supreme Court to provide a national answer to the questions that have been raised about Mr. Trump's eligibility to appear on ballots in more than 30 states. So the Supreme Court already had oral arguments with regards to this question. And most of the people who listened to those and the snippets I saw, whatever, it seemed like the justices kind of across the board were pretty skeptical of the arguments being made in favor of removing Trump from the ballot. It seems unlikely that they're going to side with Illinois and Colorado, and what was it, Maine was, I think, the
Maine,
third
yeah.
one that also removed him from the ballot. But it is still an open question, but I think most court observers think they're very likely to smack this down.
Yeah, and I also, of all the states that have acted so far, none of them are crucial swing states, right? That's the other thing to keep your eye on. Is like, which states are acting on this?
Well,
And if it was like, Michigan or something, then it's like, oh, but it's not.
It's also the number of states that have taken this position versus there's
Right.
a much larger number that have taken the other position. And the Supreme Court, I mean, they're a bunch of cowards, right? This would be very bold, right, for them to rule that he could be kicked off the ballot. Now, and the questions are genuinely complicated and tricky because this hasn't been used in a long time. And what did they mean at the time? And has it been used in the past? And all these like little nuanced political questions, et cetera. But I don't think that they, putting their ideology aside, even apart from the fact that this is an overwhelmingly conservative court that may want to help Donald Trump, I just don't think that they have the stones to make this kind of a bold move. And that's what I've been saying the whole time.
I mean, they did it in Bush versus Gore to help the Republicans, right? Then they had no problem taking a massive leap into, electoral politics to be like, nah, we're going to shut down the recount. Bush wins.
True.
But now it's a situation where the shoe's kind of on the other foot. I think that was the wrong decision, by the way, Bush v. Gore.
Oh, yeah.
But this one, I actually think, by the plain-faced reading of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, I actually think it would be a reasonable decision.
I mean, when you read it, you're like,
it's like tailor-made for what happened.
If this doesn't apply to Trump, then it doesn't apply to anyone. And when you just read it on its face.
And elected officials have been kicked out of their positions for just being at January 6th. So it's already stood up in court in some instances.
Yeah, well, and that may, if the Supreme Court rules against this, that may actually have implications for those people as well. We'll see. So that's where things stand so far. I mean, maybe, I also don't want to underestimate, I sort of swatted aside the New York case, which is moving forward here quickly. I do want to hold space for the fact that a lot of people just, if they think you're a criminal and you're found guilty of something, the fact that it's this case and not the other case or whatever, I'm not sure that all of those details go into the sense of like, oh, we can't elect this guy who's a convicted felon, even if it is the weakest of the cases, which is the hush money New York
you're
case.
saying just the accumulation of the cases alone gives people a feeling of like, I don't know about this.
Well, yes. And so even if some of the graver charges, like the election subversion and the documents case, are not actually, adjudicated until post-election, the fact that you even have the New York case going forward could potentially be significant electorally and make people feel like this guy's a criminal. Like, we just can't.
Yeah,
Even though it's not the wildest stuff that he did. It is a little bit of the like Al Capone on tax evasion kind of a situation.
That's honestly, that's Trump's Achilles heel. And that's what I've been saying all along is that, Biden has his own Achilles heels. The fact that he's aiding and abetting a genocide in Gaza is hurting him with very key demographics. Keep it real, based on the polling, his age is a massive, massive issue.
Oh, yeah.
So he's got these big Achilles heels. But for people to pretend like the 91 criminal charges are not the Achilles heel of Trump, I think that's laughable. Because, look, it's true that in the Republican primary, they either swat that aside or maybe even use that in his favor. But that's just not the case in a general election. And what we've been seeing in all the elections we've had to this point, all the primary races, Trump is consistently underperforming the polls.
Yeah.
8% here, 8% there, 7% there, 10% in Michigan. So as weak as Biden is in a variety of different ways, Trump's got a couple massive Achilles heels. I would also argue Roe v. Wade is one that's just a strike against all the Republicans too.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a race to the bottom. Who do you hate the least? That's who's going to end up winning on Election Day.
And it's a close call.
That's
a close call.
This is only a little piece of the interview. You definitely want to see the whole thing. We talked to Mehdi about a million different things, so definitely check it out. The link below to Substack. You could sign up, pay $5 a month and get the video of every interview and get it a day early, or you could sign up for free and get the audio podcast, full thing, delivered right to your email inbox. Love you guys. Thanks.